Little product placement. All right, you may have had this experience. When I first moved here. One morning, I got up very early, hopped out of bed, and almost walked straight into the wall of my bedroom. I was so disoriented. I'd been sleeping very soundly, and in that transition between a deep sleep and fully waking up, I was still imagining where I had lived before moving here. I was expecting to be back in my old bedroom, but that's not where I was. In this new place, I was still me, but all the furniture had been moved around. The doorway to the bathroom was not in its usual place. That caused some consternation. So I was really thankful when the fog finally lifted and I remembered where in the world I was. I woke up to my new reality. My brain was still imprinted so strongly with that old reality that when I first got out of bed that day, I was just on autopilot, still living my previous life. Now, when I read the Easter story, I think that maybe that was something like the experience of the followers of Jesus. It's a story that's already so familiar to most of us, whether we're Christian or not. And it sounds straightforward enough. Jesus had died, and on the third day after his death, his tomb is found to be empty. But one interesting fact is that we actually have four distinct versions of what happened that Sunday morning, each from the four different Gospels. Now, they don't all agree on every detail, like who was there or what they saw, but they do agree that something very strange and wonderful and even confusing and frightening happened that morning. Now, it was confusing and frightening because it was so beyond the normal idea of the way life and death are supposed to work. So, for the followers of Jesus, they had a hard time comprehending what this all meant. And that's perfectly understandable. The way reality is supposed to work, all of the autopilot expectations you have about life and death, they were not where they were supposed to be that day. Now, in a lot of churches on Easter, the choir stands up and belts out the Hallelujah chorus as an expression of joy in God's power over death. But, on that first Easter, the followers of Jesus were definitely not singing the Hallelujah chorus, or whatever the first century version of that might have been. They didn't realize until much later that it was even a hallelujah kind of moment. They were just trying to get their bearings and hoping that the fog would lift, hoping that things would begin to make some kind of sense, hoping to wake up to a new reality and wondering what that new reality would even be. It would turn out to be, they discovered, a whole new kind of life. The longer I'm alive and the more I think about Easter, the more I'm convinced that the new life described in the Bible goes far beyond what happens at the end of our physical existence. Now, I don't know if my perspective is anything special, but I am well acquainted with death because of the work I've done as a hospice chaplain and a minister, and also on a very personal level with many loved ones and friends who've died. Now, I don't think that makes me any kind of an expert. It just means that I have experienced a lot of it. And my experience has been that death feels very final and very empty for those of us who are left to grieve. It's like a hole has been carved right out of your heart. But for the person dying, I've witnessed time and again, it's much more like a transition from one way of being to another reality. It's a shift from what can be seen and felt in a physical way to a way of being that transcends the physical, like stepping through a doorway, entering a new life, or a lot like waking up to a life that you and I, who are still breathing, can only imagine and believe in. I believe in it. Even after all I've studied about it and all I've seen when death happens, I don't pretend to know precisely what the experience of life beyond this life looks like. Even the people who wrote the Bible don't give us any kind of consistent, clear-cut picture of that. But I still believe it's true. And why not? It's far better to believe in the power of love that can go on forever than to believe in oblivion. What good is that? At the same time, I think the Easter story is telling us about something that goes beyond the promise of life after death. I think it's just as much about awakening to new life in this life. And maybe that's why we have slightly different versions of what happened on that first Easter. Because the experience that each of those followers of Jesus had, and how they told that story, and how it was later recorded, it represents the start of their own personal awakening. It can be confusing and disorienting and frightening when you first wake up to a new reality. Over the past many weeks, our reality of life has undergone a massive shift. It's definitely been confusing and disorienting and frightening. And our experience of it has been both communal and very unique for each of us. We did not ask for this. We certainly didn't want this. It's been hard, and we're nowhere near being through it yet. Maybe we're still in the early stages of waking up, not knowing exactly how to navigate things, waiting for the fog to lift. I think it's safe to say that if we had a choice, we'd all be very happy to return to our previous reality, where at least we sort of knew what to expect. But life has handed us a new reality we're waking up to. And life did not ask our permission about it. It just happened. So in the midst of this new reality, a guy like me, a minister, is charged with the task of providing a word of hope and reassurance that everything's going to be okay, that things will return to exactly the way they were before. But that would be a lie, and I'm not going to lie to you. But I can do this. I can make you a promise. And I think it's the same promise the followers of Jesus finally understood. That real life can be, and it will be, hard and confusing and complicated and disorienting and frightening. Because life's always been that way, and it always will be. But the much bigger reality is that truly waking up to new life means embracing the fact that the power of love is more powerful and more enduring than any of that. Because it was love that refused to die all those years ago. Love that was embodied in a person named Jesus. Jesus, who never, ever promised that life would not contain suffering or anxiety. He never once said we would not be fearful or have sorrow. What he said and what he embodied at Easter was, yes, I know life is hard and disorienting, but love is far stronger than any of that, even death. And that love is not some magical, mystical fairy tale love, but love that looks like the hard and persistent work of caring for each other, for every single person on this planet with compassion and courage. Love that looks like never giving up, even when the odds are stacked very high. Love that looks like hope in the face of hopelessness. Love that looks like everyday, simple acts of human kindness and bravery. And we've seen that love expressed so many times these past many weeks. That is our new life. That is waking up to a new reality, a new consciousness of how truly interconnected we are and interdependent we are and resilient we are, and good we are, and loving we are. That is the new life we're celebrating today and in every day to come.